Okay. Good afternoon. I formally declare open this unscheduled council meeting of Colac Otway Shire Council on the 15th of June 2022, commencing at 3 p.m. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that this council meeting is recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practical. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that other than an official council recording, no video or audio recording of proceedings is permitted without specific approval by resolution of the relevant council meeting. Can I ask that council staff record all those present today? I will note that Councillor White is an apology today. Okay. Now moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meetings. A maximum of 15 minutes is allowed for question time at unscheduled council meetings. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 12 p.m. on Tuesday the 14th of June 2022. No requests were received. I have received a question in writing from Mr. James Judd. The question will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the executive management team. Okay, question from Mr. James Judd. With the proposal to fast-track rezoning of properties in multiple individual ownerships, has the council had any definitive undertaking that each separate owned parcel of land will be revalued as a separate parcel of land by the Victorian State Government valuer, or will all parcels of land be revalued as one total area, since if revalued as one lot, it rises the risk increased value of land, pushing the increased valuation into the 50% plus Victorian State Government tax on increased valuation of lands once rezoned by councils that is now law in this state. Response from General Manager, Community and Development. You are answering it. Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Judd, and through the Mayor. The assumption is that the question relates to the state government's proposed windfall gains tax. Council has not received any undertaking or advice from the state government as to how properties will be valued for windfall gains tax assessment purposes. As the windfall gains tax will be administered and levied by the State Revenue Office, inquiries of this nature would be best directed to that agency.
Thank you. Moving on to questions from the gallery. Can I have a show of hands of all those who wish to ask a question? Okay. So there's no questions from the gallery? All right, we'll move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I've got a conflict of interest. It's a material conflict of interest. It's to do with the Hillview proposal. My property, my principal place of residence is near there. And if the proposal does or doesn't go ahead, it could impact the value of my property and also could impact my amenities. So I'll declare a conflict.
Thank you. We'll just wait for Councillor McCracken to leave. Okay, now we move to item 7.1, request to Planning Minister for fast-track assessment process. planning scheme amendments, C120 Colac Bakerland, C122 Colac Hillview, and flood overlay changes. The purpose of this item is to recommend three priority Colac housing initiatives be referred to the State Government's Development Facilitation Program for accelerated assessment and determination. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. There's some property at the west end of Jennings Street, which is zoned farm and has been identified as potential residential land and within the Colac boundary. Is this sort of fast tracking, could this pick up that area of land, or is that rezoning being dealt with in another way?
Through you, Mayor, thanks for the question. The land that you're referring to at the end of Jennings Street in the farming zone is included in the area which Council's currently initiating a project to do the Deans Creek Precinct Structure Plan. That project's being part funded by Council and the State Government, and will effectively do a strategic plan for how that land will be developed and rezone the land in the same process. So that land will be picked up through an existing process.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. If this recommendation is adopted, does it affect residents' rights or ability to engage with through this process in relation to some issues they might have with the planning or the proposal?
Through you, Mayor, the process that would be undertaken if DELP is the planning authority for these amendments will be the same as it would be for the community if Council was to be the planning authority. The applications for rezoning will still be advertised publicly in the same way to the same people, and the community will have an opportunity to provide submissions either in support or against those proposals, and any submissions received will still be able to be heard by an independent panel. So if the Minister is effectively the planning authority, he will set up an independent panel to hear submissions in the same way in which Council would request an independent panel. The main difference in process is that instead of Council being the decision maker on the amendment and then forwarding that amendment to the Minister for decision, the Minister will effectively run the process and Council will make submissions as a stakeholder. But for the community, the process will look pretty similar.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. So if there's some community members with some concerns now that they'd like to be worked through and heard, if this is adopted from today, do you have an idea how they would do that, or who they would approach to air those concerns, or do we pass the package over to DELP?
Through you, Mayor, Council officers will still be involved in the process of the amendments, even if they were to be run by the Minister. So in the first instance, I'd suggest that our planning officers will be happy to talk to anyone in the community that has concerns about the proposal and talk to them about how those concerns might be addressed. But we'll be establishing some formal protocols with the government department responsible for the amendments around how we handle those inquiries, just to make sure that there's a good process for that to happen.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for those answers, Mr McNeil. Just in relation to point 3 of the recommendation in relation to negotiating the provision of social housing, and social housing is another critical issue in this shire. Can't remember the number, 344 houses, something short. But how are we imposing that requirement on those developers now? I know it says negotiation, but it is negotiation, the provision of social housing. So is there, we're imposing social housing on the developers. Do we have a number of houses, or do we have an outcome we want to achieve by that, perhaps number of blocks or whatever?
Through you, Mayor, the social housing plan that Council adopted last year refers to a number just under 5% of land being developed to be allocated for social housing. And that's for new developments where land is being rezoned, and that's the situation we're looking at here. But it is something that isn't a mandatory requirement in the planning scheme, and so it is something that council needs to negotiate with landowners before an amendment is finalised. And so what that element of the recommendation is picking up is that where council is still even if you are referring these amendments to the minister to be run as a process, you're effectively still asking the minister to ensure that social housing outcomes are being achieved through each of those amendments. And in both cases, it'll need to be a negotiated outcome because there isn't a provision in the planning scheme that requires or allows council to ask for it. It's something that we need to negotiate in good faith with the relevant parties. But the policy itself refers to nearly 5%. It could be that we negotiate something less than that. That's obviously a process that still needs to conclude.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for that answer. That's helping my thinking. And I know officers have been handling this up to this point and have had some discussions along those lines. I'm not sure whether you're able to give an indication as to how that's going and the reception of that idea by the developers. Are you able to give any comment about that?
Through you, Mayor, I think there's interest from the developers in pursuing some element of social housing within their estates. What officers have been looking to do is work with them around what does that look like, how might it be provided, because there's a number of different ways that could happen. And ultimately we'll need to just work through those details, including the number of lots that might look like. So it's a bit early to talk about outcomes, but certainly there's been a lot of awareness raising in the first instance about what it means and education, and hopefully we'll move towards agreement soon.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter, move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Happy to move this recommendation. A couple of concerns that you may have heard me ask officers about, which are satisfactory in my view in relation to people affected by this planning do have the rights to be heard and make submissions, and I'm assuming that they will be well considered. And also this recommendation enforces council's wish to achieve some social housing outcomes through the provision of during these large developments, so that some of those social issues are addressed, and I hope that can be negotiated well with the developers. I'd like to thank the Minister for Planning for establishing the development and facilitation program, because our staff are undermanned and overworked, and councils in the community have put a lot of pressure on them to get these developments on the market. Big business needs workers, hospital, there's a whole flow-on effect of good outcomes, economic and social outcomes, if we can get more people into this shire, because they are badly needed. So I think that was a great step by the state in developing this, and I thank officers for working with the state over the last 12 months to put our issues front and centre so they can be considered, and now we have this situation in front of us that we have to decide whether we will ask the DWELP, Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, to take over in effect and fast track these two developments, and also look at the flood overlay to allow another development to be achieved. So I think this is a good outcome for the community. Bearing in mind, I hope that people's issues are dealt with properly, and the lines of communication are clear so that people can engage and have their concerns dealt with and listened to. But overall, this is a great outcome, I think, and appreciate the work officers have done. and hope this will be supported.
Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Potter has said it all. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Colac Otway Shire's identified the need for more residential land throughout the Shire, and by having this planning referred in this way, these three particular planning matters will be able to proceed much quicker, I think, because of some of the workloads that Councillor Potter's identified on the Council's planning department. So these are three different areas of Colac. In addition to that, we've heard how a separate matter's been dealt with the Deans Creek area, and of course there's been the sale of Bruce Street, Council's land in Bruce Street, which is already zoned residential. So I think this is a good outcome. It will ensure that the public still are able to comment on the various planning proposals and goes a long way towards improving the availability of housing land with those other matters I've mentioned, certainly in the Colac area.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 5-0. Thank you, councillors. That concludes this unscheduled council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.